English councils are on the brink of meltdown, a crisis 14 years in the making. We're going to read into this more from Byline Times, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an article from Byline Times with the headline of English councils on the brink of meltdown, a crisis 14 years in the making. A systematic reduction of funds to some of the poorest parts of England leaves many of the most needed public services at risk of collapse. Guys, while you're here, before I give my initial thoughts, if you can, hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. So I have covered already English councils in an article from the BBC, and when I saw this one, I was initially hesitant to cover it because we've already had discussions about this, but there were quite a lot of comments that I wanted to debunk, as well as reading this article and giving my initial thoughts about the state of English councils. So I'm just going to give, this is about a crisis 14 years in the making. Now, I had a comment that I really think was probably one of the stupidest comments that I've heard, where basically saying that everything that's happening in the UK is because of Labour. Everything that's going wrong is because of Labour. That the councils have no money because of Labour. And I'd have to kindly point out to the gentleman who made that, who basically said everything that's wrong in this country is because of Labour. As much as I understand your hatred and despise for the Labour Party, it's really important to understand that Labour have not been in power for 14 years. And the argument that he also made in these comments is that Labour blocked all the Conservative motions. Even if Labour agreed or disagreed with them, the Conservatives can still do whatever they want because they have a majority in Parliament, and they've had a majority since 2015. They've had that. So this premise that Labour are somehow responsible for a lot of the situations we're in is a bit gullible, and a bit of a stretch. So sorry, yeah. Unless you have some actual evidence, please feel free to provide it. But we can't blame Labour for what's happened in the last 14 years. Yeah, we had before 2010, we actually had one of the best national healthcare services on the planet. We did. We were deemed one of the best healthcare services on the planet. Here's another statistic for you as well, because we have so many English councils who are in debt, are in bankruptcy, or are facing bankruptcy, and on the brink of obviously collapse. Let me ask you something: how many were in bankruptcy? How many were filed for bankruptcy before 2010? Councils. Do you want to have a guess? Because I did some research into it. Would you like me to know? Would you like to know? Zero. A big fat zero. We didn't have this problem before 2010. Okay? This is a combination of Conservative policy, Conservative management, Conservative government. 14 years. Yes, quite a couple of those years were Liberal Democrats, and Liberal Democrats should never be forgotten that they roll back on promises that they failed to commit as well. But this is a result of the vast majority of this is a result of the Conservative government. Now, I stated in that video, which one or two people have not paid attention. I'm going to state this again, and I'll have to state this. I might have to repeat this a few times just to put the premise on there, because some people weren't paying attention to my video before. Now, I said that a lot of this is because of due to the Conservatives and austerity. I also stated in that video, which nobody failed to point out, is that yes, some councils are not managing their budgets properly, which is why they're in the situation that they are in. I stated that in that video, and many people were saying in the comments that said that I didn't point that out. Well, I did. Feel free to go back and watch the video if you don't want to take my word for it. But I'm telling you right now that as well. So this premise that it's not that it seems like to me some people are trying to make this perception that the Conservatives are not responsible for everything that's happening, that these situations are not for. But Jeremy Corbyn, well, we don't know that. But Boris Johnson, this wouldn't have happened under Boris Johnson. This was already happening before, during, and after his leadership. These councils were falling apart. This was happening before, during, and after his leadership. 14 years of austerity, guys. 14 years. Everything that state public services own being ripped apart, all for the sake of enriching the rich in our society. And the right-wing media want to keep quiet about what's happening in this country, the real problems that are in this country, not this nonsense culture war crap, which is what they want to build this entire election and manifesto about. I want working public services. I want public services working in this country. I want to make sure that bins are collected all times. I want to make sure that our buses are running fairly smoothly. I want to make sure that the streets are clean. I want to make sure that every single public service that we own as a government owns is running smoothly and effectively. I want investment in public services. I want our councils to be looked after. And those who aren't managing their books need to be looked at too. And here's another thing as well. This is really an important factor as well. The vast majority of councils that are in these bankruptcies, these were originally Conservatives that switched over to Labour, when there were council by-elections as well. Labour, Lib Dem, or others for that matter as well. So a lot of them that are in the situation they're in were originally also Conservative in that. So that's another caveat, just to add, to insult to injury when you want to try to deflect away from the Conservatives' mistakes, because they are the main culprit for the situation that councils are in. They really, really are. If you want better public services, you must not vote Conservative at this general election. If you vote Conservative, you are voting to have less public services. What you've been having the last several years, what you've been feeling in the last 14 years, if you think you've been worse off, you ain't seen nothing yet from these Conservatives. They're going to drag it even worse for you. So do yourself a favour, don't vote Conservative, because they have never gave a damn about you. This lot don't. They generally do not. And I want our public services, I want our councils run properly. And they're certainly not going to get any help whatsoever from this Conservative government. Over half of local councils in England could go bankrupt over the next 5 years, according to a local government information unit, the LGIU. The survey revealed last week the crisis threatens to devastate our local public services. Libraries, parks, theatres, public toilets, street cleaning services, youth provisions and highway maintenance are just some of the vital public services affected by this unfolding crisis. Yeah, you remember when you used to go to, how many of you like to go to the beach? And obviously they have those free public toilets. Yeah, you can kiss those free public toilets goodbye, because you're going to be paying for them in the future. Yeah, because councils are buggered. They've got no money, and they need to get money from somewhere, and the government aren't providing any. So that's just one other thing. Libraries are less and less of them these days, unless they're state controlled. Street cleaning services, less and less of that's going to be done, which means that more rubbish and that will be left about. They'll reduce that. Theatres, youth provisions are so vital for communities. But again, highway maintenance is something that they will probably prioritise more to ensure from a local economy point of view. Loop provisions, are important for a social point of view. It's just, what are they supposed to do? They've got nothing. They've got no money. And you're going to hear in the end of this, or at some point of this, the government are going to be saying, we've invested this amount of money into them. We've invested this amount of money into them. And what you don't take into account is also the amount of money and investment that we used to get from being a part of the European Union as well. You forgot about that funding that we had for councils. Oh yeah, we had funding for the EU as well. Oh yeah, you forgot about that. Yeah, that does make you wonder, doesn't it? But sovereignty, obviously, guys. This is catastrophic for communities. 14 years in the making, councils across England have been grappling with unprecedented real world-class cuts to their spending power for well over a decade. In 2010, political choices were made at the national level to reduce government grants and transitions to a very different funding system. Councils will be expected to raise more of their income locally via council tax, business rates and local charges. Councils serving some of the poorest parts of the country have been seeing the biggest overhaul to cut to their spending power, leaving a growing number unable to balance the books. A recent report published by the Special Interest Groups of Municipal Authorities (SIGOMA) showed that the government policy has led to £13.9 billion culminated cuts to local authority budgets since 2010. £13.9 billion of cuts to council budgets since 2010. £13.9 billion. The core spending power of English councils is 18% lower than it was back in 2010-2011. In real terms, for councils serving the poorest populations, that figure jumps to 26%. These are stark examples that expose the grim reality and gross unfairness of government policy. According to the latest data, the City of Bradford Council has suffered a £955 funding cut per dwelling, whereas Cambridgeshire is £166 worse off per household. Well, you know, it's just because of Cambridgeshire and because of geography wise and all that, there's always favouritism, isn't there, for certain places, isn't there, when it comes to their funding, council and cuts. Another comparison shows that while Nottingham City Council has been trying to cope with a £950 reduction in spending power per dwelling, on the same measure, Oxfordshire County Council is just £96 worse off per residential property. You're starting to see a pattern here that, like, Labour councils and or Tory councils, like, it's almost as if, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping out on a limb here, but it's almost as if there's favouritism for certain councils, Despite years and years of tough choices, reduced service reductions and closures, asset sales, increasing council tax and desperate pleas to central government to reform the funding system, many councils are having to left to make the most unpalatable decisions to remain legally complicit. This crisis was not only entirely predictable, but it was clearly predicted. In 2010, Barnet Council published a budget chart which shows that without government reform of the social care system, their entire annual budget would be used up by adult and children care by 2023. For a growing number of councils, that is exactly what is happening now, with statutory care service for the elderly and for the vulnerable children taking up the vast bulk of financial resources, leaving too little left for everything else. Not only have councils been hit by growing demand at these service areas, they are also now seeing huge increases in people being made homeless. As the higher cost of living takes a toll on households, they ultimately present their local town hall in need of emergency or temporary accommodation. The most recent Department for Levelling Up Housing and Community data shows that a record 109,000 households living in temporary accommodation. On the ground, in our towns, cities and villages, the political choice of national government, the funding technicalities and formulas have real-world impacts on communities. For councils facing a bleak financial outlook and attempting to remain legally complicit with a balanced budget, a range of ever more unlawful awful actions become necessary. The closures of facilities and public buildings, fewer library streets not adequate maintained or cleansed, growing backlogs of cases in council departments such as planning and children's services, less action on antisocial behaviour, and generally an inability for council to be effective in a lead organisation of their place. Government has announced exceptional financial support for a number of the most distant councils this week, but a list of councils is on the brink and is set to accelerate. The growing costs of care service for the elderly cannot be met by council taxes. Structural reform and the change to the national level is definitely and urgently needed to stop a cycle of decline in our communities. And that's the problem, guys. There's a decline in our communities. Seems to be no help in sight whatsoever, and this is a very frustrating thing to say the least, guys. It's so heartbreaking. Our public services really do matter, but these Conservatives don't care. They don't care, and they will favouritism their own councils at the expense of your ones. And I know that there are some people out there who generally think that their councils, whether it's run by another political party, not Conservative, whether it's by Labour, Lib Dem, Independent, or whatever, and they think that they are at fault. Yes, like I said at the start of the video, there are some councils who are poorly maintained and looked after their budget. However, the vast majority of councils in England have been cutted, underfunded, and the austerity and the cuts to them have left our streets completely bare to the bone. Bare bone, absolutely to the bare bone, guys. This is the reality, the absolute reality here. And the only way this is going to change, is we need investment in public services. Needs to be coming from the government. And do not tell me that there ain't money there, because there's bloody money there. It is there. The government chooses not to. Yeah, they found money there for weapons. They found money for defence. They can find money for councils. This is a choice by the Conservatives. It's not a case that they can't do it. It's a case that they are choosing not to help your council where you are. But what do you guys honestly think? Do you honestly think that it is Labour's fault, despite the fact they've not been in power for 14 years? Do you honestly think it's the local councils in your area that are the situations that you're in? Maybe some of the councils in your areas have been poorly managing their budgets. Or do you generally believe, like me, that the Conservatives have caused so much damage, so much harm, that we are in the situation we are in now, and we are desperate for something different? If you found this video interesting, please hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video. And subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to financially support me in the work I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content there as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.